Another thing we do have here at Mason is a great community that provides a lot of support, and just thought we could take a couple minutes tonight and update just some financial related things about just the investment that our community makes in our school district and some things that are potentially impacting us across the state. So first thing we always like to take a look at is just some of the rankings that are out there. Niche rankings are something that we like because it does incorporate feedback from people in the district, parents, students, other stakeholders. So back in 2020, when the last operating levy passed, we were at number 5 in Ohio, number 68 in the nation. As we sit here today, number 2 in Ohio, number 68 in the nation still. And on the right side, just some report card data from the fiscal year 24 report card. One of 75 districts to receive the 5-star rating on the report card, 38th in the 38th top performing district in the state, number 11 in the gap closing measure. So grateful again for our staff and our students that work hard to make those things possible. In terms of finances, so where does our money come from? Where does it go? We have about $140 million operating budget. On the left side here, you can kind of see a little pie graph of where the money comes from. As we all know, our local community really is our lifeline, and so the support that they offer us through their property taxes and voting for levies is really what allows us to do a lot of the things that we do here in the district. The state foundation funding in that light blue section is our second biggest source of revenue. And so those are our two biggest chunks. On the operating side, or on the expense side, you can see salaries and benefits, about 83% of our revenue or our expenses. Not surprising, again, we are a people business, a service business. We're not producing inventory or widgets, and so staff really is our biggest asset and our biggest expense. So how do we spend those dollars? Where do we spend those dollars? First thing I like to point out is that on the bottom there, you can kind of see that we're spending at $1,600 below the state average. So one of the things that is a core value for us here at Mason is providing a high quality educational experience and product for our students and families at a high value for our community. And so one of the ways that we try to measure that is by saying, how do our average expenses per student compared to others across the state? And so we are happy to report that we are about $1,600 less than the state average last year. So in terms of that total amount, the total amount we spent per student last year was about $14,600. Where do those dollars go? And so this data is all from the state. They collect that from every school district across the state and report it out. And so our number one category is instruction. And so you can see we're about 61.5% last year that we spent on instruction. Happy to say that we're well above the state average of not quite 57%. The second category that is a little bit tied to that is the pupil support category, where we spend 7.3% of our dollars versus state average of 6.3%. I'll back up for a minute and say instructional is a little bit self-explanatory. It's the dollars that we spend in the classroom. So teachers, staff members, supplies, those kinds of things that go into everyday instruction. Pupil support is a little bit related. That's things like guidance counselors, nurses, other kinds of support for kids, but maybe not necessarily directly in the classroom. So again, above the state average on pupil support and instructional support. Building operations is something that we are actually below the state average on. So that would be things like utilities, maintenance, Mr. Petrie's area here. So well done, Mr. Petrie.
They just won't look.
Spending below the state average in that category. Administration, you can see we're at 9.5%. The state average is 13.5%. So again, administrative costs, somewhat self-explanatory, but spending a good bit below the state average in that area. In the last category, staff support, 3.2% in Mason versus 3.1% for the state. That category includes things like professional development and those kinds of things. So one of the things that's a big topic right now here in our community and really across the state is the state biennium budget. So every 2 years, the state comes out with their budget, and it really has a big impact on how they're going to fund school districts for the next 2 years. The current state biennium budget is House Bill 96. And so there are some things in there that are pretty significant for schools in general and for Mason as well. One of the things that's most significant for our district is this idea of a cap on the amount of cash reserves that schools can have. And so this kind of started, the way the process rolls is that in February, the governor submits his proposal, his budget proposal, then it goes to the House deliberates on it, has hearings and reviews it. They finalize their version, which they did last week. and their version included this new piece to it, saying that we're going to limit, or the state might limit, the amount of cash reserves that school districts can have, and that's at 30%. And you can kind of see here at the bottom, if that cap were to go into effect for next year, that is a significant impact for our district. That's a loss of about $18.5 million for our school. And so we'll talk more about that here in a minute, but that's a pretty big deal for us. So how does $18.5 million compare to our total? It's about 13% of our total operating budget. If you look at that on a per student basis, it's just about $1,900 per student. So I mentioned a minute ago, we spend about $14,700 per student each year. And that dollar amount would cost us about $1,900 per student next year. So that's a pretty significant number for us. So if you look at the $1,900 and the different categories that we've looked at here in the last few minutes and say, okay, well, how much do we spend in each of those categories? And if we had to take $1,900 out of any one category, what would that result in? So again, the biggest chunk of our spending is in the instructional category, about $9,043 last year. If you take $1,900 out, you can see we would have to drop that down to $7,143. And you really follow that same idea down through all those sections, down to building operations, administration. If you took a full $1,900 out of the administration category, there would be no administration. We wouldn't even be able to make up that full amount. Same idea with pupil support and staff support. If you had to take that amount just out of those one categories, there wouldn't be nothing left in those categories. So this is a big deal for us. So one of the questions you might be asking, or people are asking, or legislators are asking, is what is the right amount of savings? Why do we have savings? What is the right amount? So for families, there's lots of different financial experts out there who you might listen to or heard of or give their recommendations. Dave Ramsey just happens to be one of them. His personal recommendation for families is that the amount of cash reserves that a family should have on hand is about 3 to 6 months. So on a percentage basis, it's 25 to 50%. And what do we aim for here in the district? Our target really is 2.5 months. So we're a little below that, and so that's about a 20% reserve that we target as our minimum. We can talk more about that in a minute here on why that is, but when we get down below that 20% number, then we know that some additional things need to change, whether it's additional revenues or there's cost reductions or some combination of both of those things. So how much cash reserves did we have on hand last year? I mentioned a minute ago the 30% number is the current proposal for the cap on that number. We finished last year with about 44%. And there's this graph up here that shows a lot of the peer districts for our school. Lakota, Marymount, Madero, these are kind of schools that are in our Southwest Ohio area that we might say are other high-performing districts that the families would be interested in. And so, and we often compare ourselves to. And so Lakota's at the top there, a little above 50%. You can see we're a little above the middle at 44%, and then the numbers kind of go down from there. So there are districts, if you look at the statewide data, there are districts that have 75%, 100, 150%, but I would say in the Southwest Ohio area, you can kind of see here, we don't have any districts who are, way off the charts in terms of what those averages are. So how have we operated historically? We're 44% last summer. Where have we been over the last 25 plus years? You can see the numbers here. Back at a little bit below 20%, all the way back in 1998. In 2001, our community supported the district with a 9.95 mil incremental levy. This early 2000s was a super high growth, enrollment growth period for us. We topped out in 2011 with our enrollment. So that was really a season of a lot of growth. So there was another levy after 2001, the next was in 2005. And you can see at no point in the last 25 years have we hit anything above 50%. Again, going back to Dave Ramsey's target numbers, that 3 to 6 months, that 25 to 50%. We, as a district, have not exceeded 50% in any 1 year over the years. Dropped down below 20% back in 2021. Again, that not surprisingly or not coincidentally, that does correspond with our most recent operating levy passed in 2021 at 9.96 mils. And you can see we've kind of gone back up here over the last couple of years, back up to 44% where we are now. So why would a district want or need to save money? House Bill 920 is a a measure that we've talked about multiple times over the last few months and over the last few years, and I'll talk more about here in a minute. House Bill 920 really is the number one reason that school districts really get in this cycle of cash reserves, and why you have cash reserves and why you need cash reserves. And again, we'll talk more about that in a minute. So you can kind of see, you saw at the graph there, the last 20 years, how many operating levies that have been passed or approved by our community. Really since 2001, there's been 3. And so instead of having, being on a cycle where it's maybe hopefully every 5 to 10 years that we're on the ballot for a levy, if this cash reserve cap came into play, we might be looking at every 2 to 3 years. And so really, and that's one way of looking at it, is really to say, if you're going to have a levy every 2 to 3 years instead of every 5 to 10, you're potentially looking at tax increases just because you're on the ballot more often. So House Bill 920, something that gets a lot of press across the state, and the basic concept of House Bill 920, it went into effect in 1976 in Ohio, and the idea here is that as property values increase, the tax rate decreases, and that tax rate is called a millage rate. It's a little different. Property taxes are a little different than income tax or sales tax. Usually you think of percentages in those areas. For property tax, it's based on a mill, and so those millage rates they're not fixed. You think of a sales tax rate, it's really not going to change year to year. Income tax rates are generally not going to change, but millage rates will pretty much, for us at least, and for a lot of schools and a lot of communities, they will not stay the same. They're going to change every year. So this is an illustrative graph that kind of shows a basic concept of, again, how schools operate, or really kind of how they're designed to operate under House Bill 920. So there's a couple different lines on here. The green line is the stair-step line, and the green line really kind of represents our revenues. And so because of House Bill 920, as values go up, the tax rate goes down. The idea there is that you don't have you're not paying additional taxes as your house goes up in value. And so that really results in about a flat revenue for districts who have levies who have been passed that are subject to House Bill 920, and we are one of those districts. So revenues are generally flat, so that's your green line. The line's going to jump up when an operating levy is passed. So in 2001, 2005, 2020, you're going to have an increase there in revenues, and then you're going to be flat again until the next levy goes into effect. So you kind of have that stair-step effect on revenues. Expenses are a little bit more steadily increasing, and so you can kind of see over time when the black line is below the green line, you're kind of adding to your cash reserves, and when the black line is above the green line, you're eating into those cash reserves, eating into your savings account. So if we look at this next one, that's kind of the concept. And so for us as a district, that red circle on the left there, again, the black line exceeding the green line, so we were eating into our cash reserves. That was actually the actual result for us in fiscal year 18 through fiscal year 21. Again, we were on the ballot in 2020. That levy did pass, so then in fiscal year 22 through fiscal year 25, our revenues have exceeded our expenses, and so we've been adding to that cash balance. And so really, this is kind of the cycle of how a lot of school districts work across the state, and why you get that kind of up and down that you even saw a couple graphs ago, where one year we're at 20%, and maybe we kind of work our way up to 40% and back down to 20%. And this really is the driver of why those things happen. So one of our concerns with the potential proposal in House Bill 96 is that you've got districts like Mason who are kind of honestly operating the way that the state designed this system to work. So back in 1976, House Bill 920 went into effect. The idea there again was we're not going to have an unvoted increase in property taxes, and so as values go up, millage rates go down, and really, if school districts are going to get more money, they need to be asking their communities for support via operating levies every so often. And so that's really the way that we as a district have operated. And so in some ways it kind of feels like a penalty for doing things the way that the state kind of set the system up. And so that's one of the problems we have with this proposal. Another is that it's just just the idea that you're kind of taking away local control. So those levies have been approved by the local community. One of the beauties, in my opinion, of public education is the school district belongs to the community. Every community owns their own school district, and so we have a voted, elected Board of Education, and we have local taxpayers who are voting for levies or not voting for levies. And so there's a lot of local control in public ed, and so this proposal takes away some of that local control. So 20 mil floor, we talked about this a little bit. How many districts across the state are on the 20 mil floor and how many are not? We're pretty much right at 2/3 of the districts are on the 20 mil floor. So if you're on the 20 mil floor, that House Bill 920 really is kind of taken out of the equation. So it's really no longer in effect. And so as values increase, millage rates can drop, but they can only drop so far. And right now we're at 29 mils, but if we were at 20 mils, we couldn't drop anymore. So as, again, we've all know the last couple of years we've had great increases in, or large increases in property values in the market. And so if you're in a district, and there's 409 of them across the state right now, if you're a district on the 20 mil floor and your house goes up in value by 10%, you're gonna see a 10% increase in your property taxes. If your house goes up by 20% or 30%, the same. If you're not on the 20 mil floor like we are here in Mason, then you're not gonna have that kind of increase. And so this is a significant factor that really is kind of, if you look at a macro level of how schools are working and operating in the state and what the state is trying to accomplish with this House Bill 96, this is a big factor in that. So one of the things you might hear is that if the state implemented a 30% cap on cash reserves, there is tax relief for communities across the state. One of the ones we'll start with the second bullet point here. One of the ones I mentioned earlier is that if you implement this, instead of having, for us, for example, instead of having a levy every 5 to 10 years, we might be looking at a levy every 2 to 3 years. So it doesn't really sound like tax relief. And so maybe it's a temporary adjustment, but really in the long run, it almost exasperates the problem. On the first one, so House Bill 920, again, causing a lot of districts to see increases in local property tax payments because their values have risen. So those districts that are on the 20 mil floor, you've got across the state, you've got thousands of homeowners who are in those districts, and this cap really is not, if that's part of what the state's trying to accomplish or trying to combat here, there's no guarantee that putting this cap in effect is going to help those communities. It may, but it may not. And so there's, is it really tax relief? I would argue not necessarily. Next graph that we wanted to look at is that, so a lot of what we talked about so far is local property taxes. The other thing that's a significant factor for us here, you might recall earlier on that slide, the graph that showed 27% of our revenues coming from the state. A lot of that's from the state foundation funding formula. This graph kind of shows our total funding from the state. So you go back all the way on the left-hand side, fiscal year 15, so it's we're sitting here today in fiscal year 25. So 10 years ago, our state funding was at $4,500 per student. Right here, as we sit here today, we're in fiscal year 25, we're at $4,500 per student. So our community, again, is our lifeline, and so we're not going to get any help. History tells us we're not going to get help from the state, and so the only chance we have is getting support from our community. And so putting this limit on cash reserves, again, limits our ability to function in a healthy financial way locally, and we already know that we're not going to get help from the state. So one of the things that we work hard at and pride ourselves on is delivering value for our community. And so if you look over the last few years, we really feel like we're doing a lot of things that the state would hope that a model school district would do. And hopefully our community and people are happy with the results that they've seen here over the last few years. To go back to COVID, we were one of the districts that was kind of leading the way and staying open and making sure that we had opportunities and experiences available for kids and families through that. And then the last couple bullet points, as I mentioned earlier, consistently ranking as a high achieving district while spending at an amount that's below the state average is something that's a key goal and priority for us, and it's something that the data shows we've been able to see over the last few years. You might have seen an email here the last week where we sent some updates out on potential impacts of House Bill 96 and some of the letters that we sent to our legislators asking them to reconsider and to make adjustments to these proposals. We also asked for our community members to make their voices heard, and we heard from several people in the community that did reach out. We've also heard from our legislators that they are hearing people in our community, and so we just wanted to say that your voice does matter. We're grateful for the support of our community, for making your voices heard, and it is helping in the process.